effectively, the way that I think about what data can do for your business is three areas. The first is prioritization. The second is optimization. And the third is mobilization.
Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, the show where we explore e-commerce business strategy and the future of shopping online. Your host is John Giorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a full-service agency dedicated to growing brands on Amazon. Every week, John talks shop with the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. For today's episode, John is joined by Mike Black, Global Head of Marketing at Profitero. He and John discuss the intersection between data, retail, and e-commerce, and what data can do to empower your e-commerce business. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome everybody to another episode of eCommerce Deep Dive. On today's show, I'm excited to have Mike Black, SVP of Marketing at Profitero. Mike, we've known each other for a while. Happy to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, John.
So, I think there's a lot I want to cover today related to data and the intersection of data and retail and e-commerce. If you could tell us a little bit about your background and then what you're up to at Profitero and what Profitero is doing in the industry, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So I'm the head of marketing at Profitero. My background has always been around analytics and SaaS technology. So prior to Profitero, I was working at Nielsen, and that's, as you know, Nielsen, leader in measurement for retail for decades, was realized where I started to learn a lot about how you can apply data and analytics to growing your sales business. And it was really there too that I began to see the intersection in e-commerce. And that really led me to Profitero. Profitero is an e-commerce performance analytics company. And what that basically means is we're measuring and benchmarking almost every facet of the flywheel. And the flywheel, by the flywheel, I mean the flywheel as we know it on Amazon, which is effectively your ability to be in stock, having available product, to traffic drivers like your search performance, to your conversion drivers, your content reviews. We think about everything that a consumer sees when they click on a product, they search for a product to the page, that all of those are levers that you can influence to affect sales. And we're providing complete visibility of that performance for brands on a daily basis. So what a consumer is seeing through that experience, starting with where you're showing up in search, to is your content correct? Are your reviews really optimized compared on your competitive benchmarks? Your pricing, all of those levers, we're giving visibility to our clients in a dashboard, as well as actionable alerts. So it's really about empowering the brand marketers, e-commerce teams to know what's happening every day, to be able to affect change and meaningful change. As you well know, search being a key driver, just the ability to optimize that on a day-to-day basis is going to have a huge impact. So that's really what we're about. And additionally, the other thing that we're doing, which is really, really important to, in addition to optimizing sales and marketing levers, is providing brands with market share for Amazon. And if you're familiar with what Nielsen has done in the industry or IRI, they really define this concept of market share as a metric for measuring competitive performance. And I think it's really important more than ever to have metrics like that, because we're at an inflection point where e-commerce is growing. I think everybody this year especially has seen that lift. But when you stop to look at that from outside your own lens to a competitive lens, it really starts to change the equation. Maybe you grew 20%, maybe your competitor grew 40%. What did they do different? And that's what we're bringing together. You have the market share to understand, am I growing fast enough? And if not, why not? And that's where we can help you diagnose those opportunities. So that's really what Profitero is about. And for me, it's, like I mentioned, it's really a beautiful marriage of my experience at Nielsen, where I developed a passion for analytics, and this brand new space of e-commerce that's emerging. And I'm so excited and passionate to be part of.
Yeah, that's a great primer. I know we work together on some clients on the Amazon platform. is Profitero focused on other retail platforms outside of Amazon? And I guess if so, which ones?
Absolutely. So from our perspective, e-commerce is, especially now, it's more than just Amazon. It's going to be every retailer now has that play, and we're seeing that shift massively. So to answer your question, yes, we're actually measuring performance and benchmarking performance for brands on 600 unique retailers around the world. So not just Walmart and Target, but down to grocery level, Albertsons, Meijer. For bev companies, it's more and more about Drizzly. So even mobile applications, and then globally, Alibaba, Tmall, as well. And so we're a global platform, and for bigger brands, it's very essential to have a common currency to look at from a business perspective, and have all the regions and markets aligned on this common source of truth, and we're that source of truth.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's awesome. Then jumping into kind of the broad macro view on data and analytics. I mean, it might be an obvious question, but from your perspective, like, why is this important for brands operating in this e-commerce landscape?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We did a survey at the beginning of the year, actually. It's an annual survey. We do a benchmark survey of e-commerce folks. And one of the things we found is only about 61% of the e-commerce professionals that we interviewed they were just accessing basic sales and share data. And they weren't really accessing like the full breadth of data that's available for optimizing. And we think that's a missed opportunity. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like, effectively, the way that I think about what data can do for your business is three areas. The first is prioritization. The second is optimization. And the third is mobilization. By prioritization, I mean, effectively, like the fundamental first principle of data is really to help you inform where to focus. And what we see is there's so many moving pieces in e-commerce. It's really hard to understand where to focus, especially as you have a large portfolio. And so the first opportunity is using data like a market share data or sales data, just to understand where do we place bets in a category. So at a category level, we're playing in this category, but we see this category emerging. Should we be shifting there? And that helps to set your 3-year, your 5-year plan for investment. So prioritization at the category level is like the first workflow for where data and analytics can be informing your e-commerce strategy. If you take it down now to the tactical level, it's helping you place smarter bets in your portfolio. And so if you have a portfolio of 100 products or more products, it can be really hard to understand, are we really placing bets at a product level in the right way? And I'll give you two use cases of that. One is advertising. If anybody's spending a lot of money on AMS, you have your campaign metrics and you can understand return on ad spend. But if you now if you have metrics that are telling you about the performance of your content, or actually really granular metrics that tell you like which of your products are converting highest, you can now be even more informed in making sure that your ad investments are going to that level. So it really changes the equation where it's helping you to take this sort of noise and really focus. I think of it as like if you remember those hologram pictures, I remember when I was a kid, you stare at and you see that pattern emerge. Maybe it's like a dolphin.
Stare at it for 2 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like what it's like now. It's like there's a lot of noise out there. And I think what analytics does, it just gets you right to the pattern. Without having this to see, and it sort of really focuses you on that. So that's like the first use case. Second is optimization, and that's really about once you made that prioritization bet, day to day, you need to collect those signals for optimization. And a simplest thing is just to set some exception-based things. Be aware of when products are out of stock and get those alerts. Understanding where your competitors are bidding your terms. These are things that you need to be on top of, because if you're not on top of it, you're going to lose sales. And then the last thing I'd say, the benefit of analytics, is a little more strategic. And I think it's actually maybe the most powerful benefit is mobilization. And what that means is moving your organization to support e-commerce. And I think that's the challenge. The theme of 2021 is I think so many e-commerce leaders are still trying to get that whole organization behind it. And if you can in addition to optimizing in the moment to move your business, you can use data and analytics to merchandise your success, piloting things, testing things, and then taking those stories through your organization. That's the best way to move change. And that's the best way. And that's why I think, there's a path and a almost hierarchy needs, but mobilization is where we see these companies that they take you to the next level. They think of that way, and then they're able to just leapfrog others by just getting their organization behind that mission and that vision.
Yeah, I was wondering, I think I inherently understood the first two. I was curious where you were going with mobilization, the third one. But that makes a lot of sense. That really resonates with me. I mean, I think so frequently, especially with these large legacy brands, e-commerce may still be 2 or 3% or 4% of their total volume, which means it's just now 2020 has sort of changed everything in some ways. But prior to the kind of kick in the butt that COVID was for a lot of organizations, maybe even still, at the C-suite, they're going, well, it's 3% of our business. So like, why would we prioritize this channel that represents 3% of our business? And to be able to go and say, no, you don't understand, like, look at what competitor X, Y, and Z are doing. And it's 20% of their business. So like, this isn't 3% of our business that might be 3.5 next year. There's a huge deficit compared to that competitive set and share. I think that's a really great point. That can really be a wake-up call for a lot of folks that ultimately are going to hold the purse strings in terms of what resources, what budget to put into e-commerce as a channel. So I think that's a great point. Digging a little bit deeper into that, I know Profitero talks a lot about this concept of digital shelf. I think digital shelf is one of those concepts that is kind of often like thrown around, but never really well defined. So maybe before we even talk about it, just from your perspective, how do you define this concept of digital shelf, and kind of why is it important for brands to pay attention?
Yeah, I think a digital shelf as the digital equivalent of physical shelf. And so what I mean by that is like, if you break down that shopping experience, and you think about walking up to a shelf to purchase a product. There's a lot of different factors in place, right? There's the placement of that product. Are you even going to notice it? There's is it in stock? What you want in stock? You're looking at the pricing. You're picking up the packaging. You're seeing all these things. Maybe there's a little promotion, a little end cap or something. All of those factors on the physical world translate to what a shopper sees when they go on a shopping site like Amazon, from the search result to the content. And so now it's not a perfect metaphor, and there's many interesting things that make it different, which I think are worth exploring. But for the most part, if you grew up in the CPG world, you're very familiar with this idea of the physical shelf. And there's even this discipline and practice of walking the aisle, doing store visits, auditing, right? And effectively, digital shelf management came out of that practice, where people said, we need to do the same thing that Nielsen's doing for us, or IRI. We need to be doing this as a discipline in the digital shelf. And that's the way we think about it. Sometimes, it's some people define it like more around content, or maybe they define it more around search, because but to me, you have to think about it holistically, because all of these factors play together. If you're not in stock, no one's even going to see your content. And so you really need to think about it holistically. When you map it out that way and put discipline around it, and then all those levers are going to affect you. So that's how we think about it. I think what's really interesting, and where the metaphor starts to, if you try to make those comparisons, and sometimes that metaphor helps if you're talking to, let's say, an old school, CPG person, and you're trying to teach them, they'll get that. The thing that they might not appreciate is that the digital shelf is changing by the minute. And so all of these things it's not like a planogram where you set it for a year, or you set your promotional calendar for a year. Like, all of these dimensions are moving every single minute, or every, at least every hour or day. And that could be a mindset mindset shift for folks. And I think that's where the education opportunity hinges. And that's why you need analytics to be on top of that. No human being can manage this, this type of environment just on their own. And that's where you really need good tools to point out the opportunities and the threats.
Yeah. So when looking at a digital shelf, what are some of the most important data points or statistics that you're looking at?
Yeah. So I think for us, the key metrics that we tend to look at, or the way that we think about it, is like, availability is the bedrock of e-commerce. Like, first and foremost, that is in your order of operations of things to look at. You really want to hone in on that opportunity. Then it's all right. Let's drive traffic and let's optimize conversion. But I think this year, many of us already knew availability was important, but I think this year really highlighted that, right? And I think some of the things that we did some research on this recently, just to quantify to dimensionalize this, is we looked at just the impact of being out of stock. And one of the things that we saw in our data was that when you're moving from a 90% in-stock rate to a 30% out-of-stock rate, on average, you're losing about 42% of sales. Right? So there's immediate sales loss there. The other thing we saw is it takes about 3 to 4 days, and this is on Amazon, to recover that. So there's a period of time where you're just bleeding sales along the way. And then the other element of this that we looked at was that when you're out of stock, you're out of visibility. You're being removed from the digital shelf. And now you have to earn your spot back. And what we saw that is it takes about 6 to 7 days on average to get that organic search position back that you had when you're out of stock. Now, you probably spent some ad money to get there and boost yourself up. Now you're back to the beginning. So what does that mean? Well, it basically means that, we know availability is important, but it also means that so much of the e-commerce success can't just be some one person's job. Just running ads and optimizing your shelf is not enough. You've got to be able to have a supply chain strategy and a supply chain team that shares that mission with you. And these kind of data points we share to help those e-commerce teams and make that case. And so availability is, I say, first and foremost, universally number one, and we're hearing more about it. And I know you and I talked about this on a webinar, I think last week, just how big of an investment area this has to be.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And, there's always the risk of kind of the shiny ball syndrome in our industry. I think in other industries as well, where, talking about rep out of stock rates all day long is not necessarily the most fun or exciting or sexy thing to do. And, there's all these new and interesting programs, a lot of which brands should absolutely be paying attention to. And, my lane right now is Amazon. So that's kind of what I'm referencing. I'm sure that applies to other platforms as well. Amazon Post is a really cool thing to talk about. Brands should be taking advantage of it. But if you have a 20% rep out of stock rate, it doesn't matter. Like, if your product isn't in stock, you can do all this interesting content, creative, and all these new ideas, but the product's out of stock. So the whole purpose of retail fundamentally breaks down. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. But first and foremost, being able to see kind of where you're at and be able to measure that. And then, I think some of those statistics you mentioned in terms of actually studying this and, 6 or 7 days to kind of get back to where you were, that is also, I think, a really underappreciated phenomenon. And it's one of the places where digital shelf differs from physical shelf. On the physical shelf, you're either there or you're not there. If you're out of stock, that's bad, obviously. But the second you're back in stock, you're back in stock. It's right where you left it. And Amazon, with the flywheel effect, is very different than that. And what people oftentimes don't understand is flywheel goes the opposite direction as well. So it's not just, it's not all positive momentum creates more positive momentum. You can spin it. You can either slow it down or spin it even in reverse if you're not careful. Which I love Amazon's term for that is death spiral, which is seems pathetic, but it is what it is. So no, I think those are great points to call out. Retail media and commerce. I think right now there's a lot of different teams that need to get involved in a digital commerce strategy, as you have the intersection. Obviously, media and commerce have always played hand in hand, but they haven't necessarily been operated on the same platform. Where now you have Amazon, you have Walmart, you have Instacart, other platforms have launched media buying capabilities, where it's literally the media buying is happening at the exact same place where the ultimate purchase and merchandising is happening. How do you think about that, and how should brands be thinking about that dynamic?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, I think it's the search position is the other big lever that carries across. I think it is extensible across multiple retailers, and I think that's like the exciting theme of the industry is to see all these retailers now get in the business that Amazon did with advertising because they know how important it is. And so there's going to be a lot more effort spent on winning organically, but also winning paid. A lot more dollars, not a lot more spending. I think when I look at it, what's been interesting to me is that these teams are often different. Like you have a different team managing the e-commerce, a sales team, highly operational. They understand the ins and outs of, being in stock and really looking at margin and understanding that. And then you have sometimes a different team or even a different set of tools that are bidding on ads, and they're all trying to do the same thing, try to grow sales, but they're looking at it different. And some of the things that can happen is, all right, well, let's say we're running ads on a product, and it all makes sense why we're doing that. We've got our bid rates, we're seeing our metrics, ROAS, things look good. But what's missing are the dimensions that make a product really strong operationally. Maybe we don't understand that this product is having inventory issues, is coming in and out of stock, or potentially it's a really low converting product right now. Potentially content has changed on this. Maybe it's a product that has margin risk. These are things that sit, on the operational side. And these two worlds have been divided. I think there's been step progress to connect them, but I think there's a huge opportunity to do that. And I think it's going to become more and more important, not just to do that on Amazon, but to start to replicate those models as we go. And so, a couple ways you could think about this. One things that we're coaching our clients on is, number one is, if you are spending money on Amazon from advertising, how granular are you getting with understanding the conversion performance of those products, or the way that those products move in and out of conversion performance? And are you missing some products in your portfolio that really are great converters but aren't getting that traffic, and can you reallocate that? Something simple as that, where you could just look at your products and see if there's another lens you can cast on your portfolio that will suggest that there's some more ROI to be had. And we've had clients be very successful with finding those opportunities. And then the other is just, I think Amazon is set up in a way so that you'll suppress ads if there are products out of stock. I think you're going to see a lot of inconsistency platform for platform. So you can't assume that if you're running an advertisement on all these platforms that everything's going to work perfectly. You're going to need to look at out of stock rates across your retailers to make sure you're not sponsoring things that are out of stock. Even it's advantageous to look at your competitors' out of stock issues and maybe target them on that. And I think also the big question that I'm hearing is there's a lot of questions around almost like incrementality. We're already getting this high rate ranking organic, so why are we bidding on it? And I think so. It's kind of like, I think the first phase of everything is it's just a race. We got to crank up that flywheel. We got to get to the top of the position, and then phase two is, how do we get smarter about this? Advertising costs, customer acquisition costs are going like this. Budgets aren't endless. We got to get smarter. And if you can get smarter, you're going to outlast the rest. Your budget's going to last longer. And I think that's the next phase. And I think everybody's going to need, the way you do that is you got to look for data. You get new data sets, new insights. You got to get that competitive advantage and be first to market with getting that out there and operationalized.
Hey there, I'm Dave Zimmerman with Orca Pacific. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. We're a full-service agency exclusively focused on Amazon with capabilities for everything a brand needs to succeed on the platform. From advertising strategy, content development and SEO, to merchandising and marketing. If it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform, our dedicated teams are leaders in this space. Our robust suite of services includes expertise on the back end as well, from operational support, demand forecasting and planning, to the right fulfillment options, and higher level strategies like long-term planning, channel management, and access to beta programs. To learn more, visit our website at www.orcapac.com. That's ORCAPAC.com. And a business development manager will get you up to speed on how we can accelerate your Amazon business. Now, back to the show.
We're approaching the end of the year. It's been a wild year for e-commerce. A lot of lessons that I'm sure have been learned. Next year is going to be very interesting for a number of reasons. Everyone's going to start doing their, yearly recap, top things for 2021, podcasts and articles. So like that's coming up. Maybe let's do a mini version of that here. What are the most sort of interesting lessons you've learned about e-commerce this year? And then what are your expectations for 2021?
So I tend to geek out. I geek out over organizational things. So one of the big revelations this year, and right around the start of the pandemic, we started running a conference series, and it gave us an opportunity to get a lot of brands just talking about being in this moment of change. And the number one thing that sticks out to me is it's education. And a lot of it is internal. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that a big portion of an e-commerce leader's job is education, getting into the business units, teaching them the fundamentals. We take the basics for granted now, availability, traffic, and conversion. But as you go to that next level, you can't take it for granted. You gotta really commit the time to doing the 101, teaching everyone job specific to your job. If you're the Walmart salesperson, this is what you've got to care about. And I think that's the big learning. And as we talk to our executive clients, that's where their head is at. They're thinking about how do I train this organization? How do I make this simple and sticky? And some really great creative things are coming up. I'm seeing e-commerce teams that are developing their own podcasts internally, newsletters, just socializing this and sharing glossaries, simple things like that. And I feel like that's the unsung part of this. Is we're e-commerce very much hands-on keyboards job. It's really like, all right, we got to plug away. We're going to win this every day. But I think there's much to be said for playing that bigger game, which gets back to mobilization. And if you can mobilize and you can educate, that's going to be a huge competitive advantage because your organization is going to move faster than the rest that are still going to be going through this growing pain. So that's one of my biggest takeaways of the year.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it might have been on this show, and I forgot who I was talking to about it, but it was a similar concept. And, we were sort of talking about the original like digital revolution in business. And, it went from like, oh, we need a digital team. And then it was like, no, wait a minute, like our entire business is digital. We can't have just like a digital team. The whole like the concepts around digital need to just be woven throughout the organization. Like a lot of industries have gone through that 10 or 15 years ago. And the consumer product industry, frankly, has been a little late to the party. Now, part of that is just out of necessity. If 97% of your volume was going through traditional channels, like you didn't have to do that. Now, all of a sudden, if it's, only 80% or only 70%, and that might be 50% or 40% going through traditional channels, it's not good enough to just have a group of like 14 people that focus on e-commerce and they know everything there is to know about e-commerce, and then everyone else is just kind of, stuck in the past. Like it's not going to work. You need every part of the organization to be educated. And that's easy to say, very hard to actually do, especially in a big organization. So it sounds like the answer to that is yes. I think this has been talked about now for a few years. in the macro, do you see enterprise brands, CPGs, like really starting to take action on this now? It's kind of now and then going into next year.
Yeah, I do. I see a couple things, couple themes. One theme is seeing a lot of, you could call it a center of excellence, and I think center of excellence is one way to think about it. But I'm also seeing the rise of these, what I'll call e-commerce acceleration teams.
Okay.
The way, and I think there's like, I think people they're going back and forth. There's like two ends of the spectrum. One is we need a centralized team to drive all this change, and then the other is like, okay, we need it all embedded. I think the reality is it's somewhere in between, because as much as you can have, I see a lot of organizations going into the business units, and I've seen examples where you have an e-commerce person embedded in each business unit. So in addition to having a central organization, you have someone that's wearing like a digital hat, and maybe it's almost like sometimes it's like a digital shopper marketing person. So you have shopper marketing in the traditional way, but you got someone that has like a digital hat on that. And they're sort of thinking through, all right, like if we look holistically at this retailer from both digital and brick and mortar, like here's the total view of what we want to execute. And so you see that in the businesses, and I think that's helping. But at the same time, there's certain big hairy topics no one could, if you disperse all that, they couldn't solve, such as who's going to advocate for e-commerce specific innovation?
Yeah.
E-commerce specific packaging.
Yeah.
Those kind of big things that you'll probably, if you nail the strategy, check the box, move on to the next thing. But they're just sitting out there. E-commerce supply chain. I mean, we did at the beginning of the year when we did our survey, I think we found that maybe 10% of organizations even had any kind of e-commerce specific strategy for supply chain. So what you have to have that balance, which is kind of moving to embed where it makes sense. And those are the things generally you're embedding when there's like things you need to act on really quickly. Like you don't want this like delayed feedback loop. There's some things you just like, all right, we need to act on this right away. And then you have those like 1 year, 2 years, 5 year strategic things that are going to take a long time. And you need those champions out there advocating for it. That's how I'm seeing it evolve. People experimented one way, they started the other way, and now they're like, hey, we have a hybrid approach. And eventually, 5, 10 years, 15 years from now, it'll be so embedded, almost like back in the day when social media was its own center of excellence, or search. Like back when I started in marketing, I was in Staples in the retailer, and there was a whole center of excellence team around that. And eventually, it just becomes course of business, but it takes some time to get there.
Anything else in terms of looking forward to next year? Like any big changes you expect next year?
Yeah, I think the other theme that I'm seeing is I think there's a lot of e-commerce is really tactical, operational, and we talked a lot about, if you think about what a lot of leverage you can pull on the site. I think you can't get operational at the risk of forgetting about the consumer and just forgetting about the basics of brand storytelling and just top of the funnel marketing. And so a good example of that is I think with this year, you had so many shoppers that were up for grabs in some ways, like new to brand, making their first purchase online. And I think loyalty in this new world is a little bit more up for grabs. And so what you have to do is, like, I think what I see a lot of brands doing now is really shifting a lot of that focus to social commerce advertising. My Instagram feed is full of advertisements around products that I can click on and get taken to Amazon or Target. And the thing that I notice about them is when a year ago, when I saw those ads, it was very tactical. It was like literally a picture of the page on Amazon. Yeah. I'm like, all right, you're selling me a product. What I see now is like some good storytelling, brand building. The content I'm seeing is actually around problems. Like I saw like a pet ad That was actually, so I used to just get these pet ads. I have a cat, and it was just like, all right, here's a cat food bag.
Yeah.
Great. But now it's actually an ad that says it's all about like caring for the health of your cat. It has a whole like story, a framework for how to think about it. And I'm like, that's interesting. It's actually content marketing. I want to learn something. And then I click and it takes me to a brand store on Amazon that it kind of lays out, these are the different stages of your cat's maturity and the different things. And then, it's actually educating me about that and selling to the portfolio, not just a product. So I think there's a lot, when you move out of just, when you're an operational mindset, you just want the quick win. Here's the product, go. But if you start to think about the consumer, you start to think about that, it's storytelling, it's putting things in context, it's education, it's content marketing, which we know. And I just see that being another theme. It's just part of the maturity. People are learning and they're just saying, you know what, the quick and easy ways of working, we gotta go back to the hard stuff we know that works. And now I see this like next level of marketing. So that's what I think next year is going to be too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think more and more the low hanging fruit's been picked with e-commerce. Like it's, the person that's shown up and needs to buy a thing is obviously that's still happening, but like it's getting more and more expensive to get in front of that person. So now it's about, another way of saying this, and I don't know if this is exactly kind of where you were going, but I think creative is going to become a more important element of e-commerce next year and into the future beyond. Upper funnel, creative, storytelling, all of those things converge. And I think it's in parallel with customers starting to, or consumers, I should say, starting to shop more. They're still buying online. They're buying online more than they've ever bought. But I also think in parallel to that, they're starting to shop more online. And you've seen that with the direct-to-consumer revolution, but I think you're starting to see that even now on the traditional e-commerce platforms like Amazon, I guess, would be that. Amazon, Walmart, some of the others, I think they're leaning into this, can we be a destination for shopping, for conducting commerce as entertainment, versus just like, I need cat food, I need it tomorrow, I'm going to go to Amazon and buy it. That's always going to be the bread and butter, I believe, but there is a whole other sort of tranche of consumer behavior that, in my opinion, mostly happens in the physical world right now. Like most shopping or entertainment is still conducted in physical spaces. Stores are never going away. In 50 years, there will still be stores. But I think a lot of that is up for grabs and can be brought into digital channels if both the brands and the platforms put the kind of required effort into it. So
it's a great, and I think creative is a great way to talk about it. And I think I agree with you. And I think you see it, the other way that you see it, and you're right, it's a shared journey between the brands and the platforms. And sometimes they're not always in sync. Brands are way out ahead and the retailers are catching up. But I think the other element of shopping is category knowledge or traditional category management. I think one of the things that is different about Amazon and Walmart is when you go to Amazon, it's not a really curated experience, or at least it's like you get there and there's a massive result and you just gotta like. But if you see what Walmart has done and some other sites that come from that traditional category management, they structure the site first from a category lens. I think you're looking for these types of things, and then you can dig deeper. And I think it's like merchandising and marketing. Yeah. And I think they're evolving together where the retailers are starting to think more about category management, which is shopping is this activity, and categorization makes it easier for shoppers to identify what they need and make trade-offs.
Yeah.
And it's curated with a structure on those trade-offs. Whereas this world of just like, let's, here's a search result with like 8,000 search results. Yeah. Many are not relevant. Some are from 3P sellers. It feels a little overwhelming. So I'm kind of wondering if the pendulum will swing a little bit. And it definitely varies by category, right? And some categories you're going to need that. Some are just going to be, just transactional. but it'll be interesting. I think you're right. I think we're on a curve of 2021 where it's going to be, from what I control brand wise, creative, and retailers are going to be getting better at like learning how to merchandise to support those shopping experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree. Mike, this has been great. Before we go, how do people get in touch with you? How do they find out more about Profitero?
Yeah, so our website is www.profitero.com. You reach out to me. My email is mike@profitero. It's pretty easy. And then LinkedIn is another great way to connect.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for being on.
John, thank you so much.